Good day and welcome. In this lecture, I would like us to go through basic revision of the Advanced Performance Management Exam, APM. Since you are in this lecture, it means that you are familiar with some or most of the ACCA content, and it's important to remind you that if this is an optional exam paper, it requires a high level of analysis and evaluation in examination. It is also important to remember that you need to demonstrate that you can apply your knowledge under exam scenarios. The APM exam, when you look at the syllabus, it is quite an easy syllabus, I would say. However, when you look at the exam results, it seems that it's not exactly the case. So this is how the syllabus looks like. It is made in 6 areas. For you to ensure that you pass the examination, you need to understand the 6 areas with a relatively good level of detail. The good news, most of the content you find in APM, you would have covered it in other modules. In particular, you would have covered it in the performance measurement exam, formerly F5. You would also have covered most of these contents in strategic business leadership, previously or mainly coming from our previous P3 exam. So if you did pass this exam, it's quite an advantage going into this paper. It's not mainly new things, these are things you already know. However, there is a fundamental difference between these previous exam papers and APM. It is my belief that this is probably one of the reasons students fail, because when they receive the syllabus, when they get the material, you read it, you probably feel, I'm familiar with this, I should not feel with that. And logically, you should feel like that. Except that when you're about to write the examination, the skills being tested, they change. And if you don't properly adjust for the skills being tested in this exam, you will not be able to get the needed pass mark. And you'll see that when you look in our historical performance, in our option exams, PM together with audit, they have historically very low pass rates. On my screen then, you see that this is our advanced paper, which we're looking at. Indeed, the pass rate just above audit. And if you look at this exam, it is the lowest pass rate. And if you come here, it also the lowest pass rate. If you come here, it is the lowest pass rate with audit. Without going much further, it's clear therefore that this exam is quite challenging. But why is it so challenging? Apart from getting the knowledge, which I believe every student who writes this exam, they would have read the textbook, they know the theory behind, they fail to apply their knowledge. It's quite sad because you'd see that 1 in 3 students pass. This is our average examination. So if we are seated like this in the examination hall, there is a student behind you, in front of you, and so on. Okay, this is just a section of students sitting in the exam hall. We have 6 students here. If this one passes, I can say this one will fail, and this one will fail. Probably this one will also fail, and this one will pass. That is how it is in the examination. It's up to you now to make sure that you become among the guys who are passing. And this is exactly the reason why I'm doing this session. So to help you answer that, I'm going to use past exam papers to show you how do you address your exam questions, how do you illustrate your skills in the examination. I'm going to use question papers from 2016 to illustrate how to answer this examination question. So I'm going to take the first paper. It's going to be the September examination. next 5 minutes, we'll go through the reading of this paper. In the examination, though, I'd recommend anything between 10 and 15 minutes to analyze the scenario. So when you're reading this scenario, we have got different skills as regarding reading. Personally, I'm quite a fast reader. I don't know about you, but if you're a fast reader, I would recommend that you read the case first before you go to the questions. This will take you probably 5 minutes, at most 10 minutes. If a fast reader, 5 minutes should be enough to allow you to finish reading the case. Then, after reading the first time, you go to the questions. On the questions, I emphasize, please read, annotate the questions before you start going back to answer the question, so that you understand the different elements being asked in the examination. If you are a slow reader, I recommend a slightly different approach. Instead of reading for the first time, it will probably be better for you to go straight to the questions. Now, because you guys are writing computer-based examinations now, when you open your question paper, it will show you different windows. So you go to the window showing the requirements for the first question. And once you've understood those requirements, I would say 5 minutes will be okay. Just study the questions. If you are so slow reader, I recommend that 5 minutes you spend it reading the questions, the requirements, so that because you're a slow reader, you won't have the time to move a lot between questions and answers. You don't want to answer question number 1A only to find out that what you wrote in 1A was going to be used as answer in 1B. If you do like that, it means that you did not answer part A correctly. Right, let's go to our question and we read. So I'm a fast reader. I'll first take my 5 minutes of reading this paper. I'll read it loudly. Monza Pharma is a developer and manufacturer of medical drugs based in Finland, but selling its products all over the world. As a listed company, the overall objective of the company is to maximize the return to shareholders, and it has used return on capital employed as its performance measure for its objective. For this objective, there has often been a comment at board meetings that it is good to have one easily understood measure of consideration. The company has 3 divisions. The drug development division develops new drugs compounds, taking these through the regulatory systems of different countries until they are approved for sale. The manufacturing division then make these compounds. The sales division, it then sells these drugs. Monza's share price is underperformed compared to the market and the health sector in the last 2 years. The chief executive officer is identified that its current performance measures are too narrow and is implementing a balanced scorecard approach to address this problem. The current performance measures are return on capital employed, average cost to develop a new drug, and the revenue growth. The CEO engaged a well-known consulting firm who recommended the use of a balanced scorecard. The consultant began by agreeing with the board of Monza that the objective, the organization's medium-term strategy was as follows: create shareholder wealth by improving in drug development, efficiency in drug manufacturing, success in selling their products. The consulting firm has presented an interim report with the following proposed performance measures. We're given 4 measures in the 4 perspectives of the balance scorecard here: return on capital employed, revenue growth, average cost to develop a new drug, training days provided for employees each year. The CEO and the lead consultant have had a disagreement about the quality and the cost of the work, and as a result, the consultants have been dismissed. The CEO has commented that the proposed measures lack insight into the business and do not appear to tackle issues at strategic, tactical, and operational levels. The CEO decided to take this work in-house and has asked you, as the performance management expert in the finance department, to assist him by writing a report to the board to cover a number of areas. First, following the disagreement with the consultant, the CEO is worried that the consultant may not have been clear about the problems of using the balance scorecard in their rush to persuade Monza to use their services. Second, the CEO wants you to evaluate the choice of performance measures currently used by Monza and those proposed by the consulting firm. Third, there have been a debate at board level about how return on capital employed should be calculated. The marketing director stated that she was not sure what profit figure or of at least 4 which have been available should be used and why, especially given the large variations in the results which this gives. She also wondered what the effect would be of using equity rather than all capital to calculate the return on investment. Some basic data has been provided in Appendix 1 to assist you in quantifying and evaluating these possibilities. There has been a debate at board. Okay, I did that. In addition to these concerns, the board is considering introducing a total quality management approach within Monza. Obviously, quality of output is critical in such a heavily regulated industry, where the product can be a matter of life. The CEO there's been discussion about testing this idea within the manufacturing division. The CEO wants to understand first the cost associated with quality issues within the division. To aid your analysis, the suppliers, he has supplied some detailed information in Appendix 2. Next, the board requires an outline of evaluation of how a total quality management TQM approach would fit within the manufacturing division. Finally, the drug development divisional managers have been lobbying for a new information system which will assist their research chemists in identifying new drug compounds for testing. The new system will need to be capable of performing calculations and simulations, which will require high computational power and memory, but will also need to have access to external data sources so that these scientists can keep up with the development in the field and identify opportunities. The CEO is worried about the cost of such a new system and wants to know how it would fit within the existing lean management approach within the organization, within that division. All right, I'm not sure how many minutes I took to read here. I was reading loudly, so logically I should be slow to allow you guys to understand. If you took 10 minutes to read this silently on, I would not say that is not the most efficient way, but it's okay, it's acceptable. Remember that in the examination, your hour exam is 3 hours, 15 minutes. These 15 minutes, I'd say this is for them to manage your emotions in the examination. So you are not really focusing on question 1 or question 2 or question 3. Probably what you just do here, log in your system, try to move around the question. I'm not saying you must learn the system, not the something. Logically, you would have done this already. But so that you manage your nerves, you calm down, you call the examination, move between question 1, probably see the requirements, question 2, or the requirements. Personally, whenever I was writing exams, that's always how I did it. Always how I did it. Being a fast reader, it has an advantage because I do not have pressure. If you're a slow reader, probably you might say, I want to do question 1 straight. So immediately you can use this 15 minutes to read the whole case. It is still okay. All right, let's go to the requirements. Write a report to the board of Monza. The requirement is straightforward here. Each wants you to write a report. This is where you get some free marks. If they say write a report and you go and write something, not a report, you will lose marks for that. Many students who fail ACCA, they fail in the 40s. And to ensure that you gain these 10 marks, we have professional marks in the examination. The professional marks, they are not technical. They simply want to see, do you know how to arrange your work? Do you know how to communicate? So these are easy marks because you have been communicating all life. Many of you at this level, you are managers or you work with managers. So you should be able to communicate with your manager. And this is basically what they are testing you in the examination. Can you communicate with people around you? So if it is a report, it is the structure of a report. Who are you writing to? Where is it coming from? What are we going to discuss about? So these are basics we should know. You'll probably get 2 marks for just laying out your report properly. Because I'm writing a report, I'll include the introduction. These are general concepts which are not linked to this particular question, but these are things you should always know. So I'll use an introduction when I'm going to write my answer. Definitely, I'll use paragraphs. Right. The first requirement, it says, assess the problems of using a balanced scorecard. So when you see a question like this, you need to understand the verb. The verb is assess. What are you doing when you're assessing? When you are assessing, you are discussing the strengths and the weaknesses of a particular thing. When you are assessing, it's more or less the same as saying you are evaluating. So if you discuss one side, if you discuss these problems, if you only raise the problem, you are not assessing the problem. If you describe the problem, you are not assessing the problem. You have to describe the problem and tell us what does this really mean. And what does this really mean to the particular company? We are answering a company called Monza. If you don't address your question to Monza, in the examination, we say you did not illustrate the application skill. So, as I said, when you are going to assess, you are going to discuss the positives and the negatives, the challenges in this case, or the problems associated with this particular balanced scorecard technique. Now, let's go back to your syllabus. When you go back to your syllabus, the balance scorecard is basically, it says
I've lost video. I don't know if you're experiencing the same.
I experienced the same. I think he has an internet problem, looks like. How are you, Dylan?
That's fine. I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay, doing well.
Let's wait for him, then he'll come through, I guess.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks.
Cool. All right, thanks.
My apologies for that. I lost network for a while. Suppose that you can hear me now. So I was explaining that the syllabus, it does tell you the words which they're going to ask you in the examination. So as you are preparing in the next 3 weeks, make sure that you go to the syllabus and you try to answer these questions. Try to answer these questions. If you don't do this between now and the day you're going to write the examination, you might not be able to answer the actual questions you're going to see in the examination. I go back to my question. We want to discuss the problems of using the balance scorecard. Now, the balance scorecard is a technique which we have seen. I did ACCA from the first examination. I learned about the balance scorecard, I think, the first time when we did the PM examination. Then it was called F5. You learn about the balance scorecard when I did P3 so many years ago. I'll call it SBL into these terms. And then you will use it when you're going to write advanced performance measures. I don't think it is now covered in the SPL now. It will be covered, but not the same skills. All right, so because this is a familiar concept, you might think it's easy. It is not the model which is easy. It is how you write which matters a lot here. So as you can see, the question was saying evaluate, assess the problems of the balance scorecard. You remember the balance scorecard is a model which has got 4 perspectives. You are given the perspectives in the examination on this particular question. So remember, the perspective is not going to end in mark, unfortunately. However, that is an advantage because they've given you how to address it. So what are the problems you see from the balance scorecard? We know that we've got 4 perspectives: the financial, the customer perspective, the internal business process, and the innovation and learning perspective. These are 4 areas you must work on. If you look at the question here, they gave you an indicator when you're answering this particular question. Now, I say that if you're a slow reader, you go to the questions first. Now you know the questions. I want to look at the problem balance scorecard. So definitely, when you go to this part dealing with the balance scorecard, it's going to be very essential. It's going to be very essential to pay attention to these sections because that is where your answer is going to come from. Now, in these particular questions, you would see that they specify that it is good to have one easily understood measure. In the balance scorecard, it is giving us at least 4 perspectives. This is the first problem we have on the balance scorecard. It does not suit what the company intends to achieve, or generally speaking, in an organization, it's easier to manage one than to manage 4 areas. So the balance scorecard creates so many performance measurement areas, which makes it hard for managers to interpret overall performance. Okay, what do I mean by that? When you're managing a business, you might find out that financially, it is with very good results. We will do so much good profits. In the question we're answering here, the company we're dealing with actually, it is with a very bad financial performance. It is with a very bad financial performance. However, having a bad financial performance might actually be a short-term thing, and you might find out that the company is doing so well in other areas. Therefore, when you give your conclusion on a balance scorecard, it might be difficult. When you say the company is doing poorly and you say the company is doing well, what are you saying? Yes, it's doing well elsewhere, it's doing poorly elsewhere. The balance scorecard does not give us an overall measure. And this makes it difficult to make the final decision. If you ask, is Monza doing well? You probably say it is doing poorly based on this comment. And this is what you want when you're making a decision. The company is struggling, or the company is doing well. However, the balance scorecard makes it difficult to make that conclusion because there are so many different measures. That is the first problem which you have. The second problem with the balance scorecard, because it has got 4 perspectives, we have what we call information overload. So this means that we are going to give too much information to whoever is supposed to make a decision. Now, generally speaking, people like symbolize, and people, we're not very intelligent. Yes, many of you, some of you are quite intelligent, but many of us like me, who are not very intelligent. Yeah? So when you give us too much things to do with, the brain will not be able to see the bigger picture. And this is a problem we have. It can result in information overload. You would see that in this particular question, the CEO, they had a problem with the existing measures. And why were they having a problem? They thought that the report does not address the different levels of performance in an organization. In other words, the CEO is saying, I want to see a discussion of tactical issues, tactical financial issues. I want to see a discussion of strategic financial issues. I want to see a discussion of operational financial issues. You would see that by what I've just described now, the CEO wants to see 3 performance measures related to financial issues. The CEO wants to see 3 learning and innovation measures. The CEO wants to see 3 business process measures. So we now got 12, at least 12 performance measures in the report. This results in information overload because there is too much which you need to analyze. Imagine that you are the CEO, you are the finance director, or whoever is a board member. We have got 12 issues to address. Which one should you prioritize? The balance scorecard does not tell us which to prioritize. So this can result in too much information overload, and people won't know how best to make the final decision for the company. The third problem, closely related to information overload, it is data gathering. So when you collect our data and data processing, in the business world, everything is driven by money. If you are going to gather data covering 12 areas, it means that you need to invest in information systems. For example, you need to have an employee gathering information about financial performance in a company. You may need a computer or an information system which gathers information about that. You also need probably a person collecting information about innovation and learning, or about our customers. Now, this means that there is additional cost when using a balanced scorecard system. There are costs associated with that. So the first cost, you'll see that in this particular question, they did mention something to do with information systems and our engineers. Let me just look at that part where they discuss about that. They did discuss something to do with information systems in this particular paragraph. So unfortunately, this comes at a cost. And the good thing, the question did tell you about this. So if you were attentive when you're reading the case, you should be able to generate a good number of points based from your general knowledge, but also from the information provided in the case. All right, now that I've discussed the problems, the question is giving you 8 marks. Now we're focusing on how to pass this question. We've discussed the theory behind the question. We've got 8 marks here. Generally speaking, you will get 1 mark per point. So raising a point, you'll get a mark. You'll get another mark for evaluating, for assessing, and for application. So you raise the problem. This is how I'll write my first point. Under the balance, so in the introduction paragraph, I remember I said that you write an introduction paragraph. In the introduction paragraph, I'll write it like this. I'll try to go a little bit slow, but if you want to type what I'm just saying, it might help you. As senior managers, The performance of a company is very crucial. There are several performance measures you can use, and one favored approach is using the balance scorecard. The balance scorecard, it works on 4 perspectives. I'll list those perspectives: financial, customer, innovation and learning, and business process. That's my introduction paragraph. I expect to get a mark, at least for professional presentation of my work. I skip that part. I go to the technical element. This is my second paragraph. The first problem arising from the balance scorecard is the use of many metrics. The balance scorecard does not show overall performance of a company. Therefore, it is not a decisive tool. Pay attention to the last word I use. Therefore, it is not a decisive tool. That particular wording I've used there, I've directly answered the question. The question said assess. And therefore, I've shown the implication of using the balance scorecard. I said that you get a mark for application. Please note that when I'm saying application, you don't have to make sure that all the 4 points are applied, but if you can do that, the better. I know that you guys are typing. I'm not sure how fast you are with the typing. If I want to apply here, I would say apply like this. In the case of Monza, the company already indicated they prefer one performance measure. So I did apply the, and while I'm just writing, I'm just repeating what I'm talking about. The company already indicated that they prefer to have one performance measure. The board said they prefer one performance measure. So I've applied, I'm done. I should get my 2 marks for that. Not 1, I will get my 2 marks. So if I did get my mark on the first part, on my introduction, I have the professional mark there. Then on the technical part, on the 8 marks, I have 2. Let's continue. The second problem I raised with the balance scorecard, I said it is to do with okay, I said information overload. And that's the second 2 I raised there. Yeah, it was information overload. This is how I abstract my answer. So this is how I write exactly. The second problem of BSc. So the reason I'm using BSc in the exam is try to save my time, because the examination already showed you how to use BSc. Please make sure that you don't use abbreviation in the examination without defining them. The second problem of the BSc is information overload. That is my point. I expect to get a mark for that. But if I leave it like that, I'll fail the exam. Well, they can give you a mark, but you do not explain what exactly it means. You definitely not get 2 marks for doing that. This means that by addressing the 4 perspectives, there is a broad range of information for analysis by managers. The managers or the board might not have sufficient time and skill to analyze this. So I've evaluated here, the board may not have the right skills to analyze this information. If you wanted to apply it to the case, you might apply it like this. The CEO mentioned they need this to address the 3 levels of management. This will result in about 12 metrics. I've applied my question. I should get my 2 marks for that. You can try to type what I'm saying, and you see how much time it is taking you just to go through along those lines. All right, that is our second problem. I have 4 marks now. I've got 8 marks on the go. As far as I'm concerned, I would say I have passed question number 1A. Because out of 8 marks, I got 4 marks out of 8. That's okay. However, because some questions I may not be good with them, you must aim to get at least 6 marks on a question you are comfortable with. This means you must aim to get 75% on those questions you are very comfortable with. If you can get 100%, perfect. The third problem is related to the cost of data gathering and processing. This is how I write my answer. That's not the point. The BSc increases the cost of data gathering and processing. So this is my point. I expect to get a mark for that. However, that's not a good point if you write like that. It's not enough. You have to evaluate, you have to analyze, expand on that point. And this is how I expand it. By requiring information on the 12 metrics, it means that Monza has to have data capturing across many areas of business. This may need more employees as well as more information, I'll say IT, information technology, or more equipment on information technologies. So by evaluating that, I've raised the point, I've illustrated how it works. I expect to get my other tools for that. What other problem could you write? Another problem of the balance scorecard. The balance scorecard does not specifically address the primary purpose of an organization. The primary purpose of an organization is to increase shareholder wealth. That is the primary purpose of a balance scorecard, of performance measurement. If it is a private company, we want to increase shareholder wealth. And is this a private company? Of course, yes, it is. I just going to go back in questions now to confirm that. This is a listed company. Their shares are traded on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, on the London Stock Exchange. Clearly, therefore, this means that the shares are owned by private individuals or private firms. As a result, shareholder wealth is a very important element. The balance scorecard does not have a direct measure of shareholder wealth. Therefore, it does not address the main needs of our investors. Okay, I'll leave my answer is something like that, and I expect to get 8 marks. Do you have a comment? Do you have a question on what we've discussed so far? If you have, you can unmute yourself. You can ask it. I'll just give you a minute to do that.
Yes, Leonard, is it ROC and revenue growth? Is it not a performance management? It is not a financial.
All right. Please know that my last point, I said shareholder wealth. I did not say financial. I said shareholder wealth. So what we're measuring is wealth. And please note the wealth, it can be measured in financial terms, yes, but it is not measured using revenue. If I make 10,000 today in this lecture, do you think my worth is increased just by that statement? If I charge clients and you guys pay me 10,000 for this lecture, would you say my worth is increased?
No, not really. Maybe the revenue is increased, but I was just saying that if the customer's revenue has grown up, the company's revenue has grown up, that indirectly increasing the wealth of shareholder.
All right. I like the word you used today. You said directly increase. So what is the problem we have? It does not measure directly the shareholder wealth. It is a model generally. It does not measure shareholder wealth because that's not what it's trying to address. We don't have what it says perform wealth measurement. It rather equals the financial perspective, customer perspective. It does not measure wealth exactly. Indirectly speaking, financial performance measures, they might measure wealth. But it does not say that the main thing we should measure. It does not tell us we should measure financial first or customer wealth. So it does not generally measure the wealth of the holders of the shareholders, which should be the primary purpose of any performance measurement tool. All right, so you answered that if I make 10,000, doesn't necessarily mean I've increased my wealth. That is correct, because you don't know how much cost I'm incurring. Probably I charge you 10,000, but my rent to do this class, I'm paying 15,000. So revenue growth really is not really a good measure of wealth. All right, for that particular element of measure, I'm discussing the elements given in this question. That is asked in part number B of our question. Before I move to item number 2, did I address your concern, or you still need me to clarify anything else? Please feel free if you want me to clarify.
You did. Thank you. You did. Thank you.
All right. So the second requirement, it says evaluate the choice of the current performance measures. Evaluate the choice of current performance measure. Then it is with the second requirement, and the consulting firm's proposed performance measures. We have got 2 questions combined into one. We have 2 questions. The first question is to evaluate the current performance measures. The second question is to evaluate the consulting firm's proposed performance measures. If you don't pay attention to that, you will not have presented good communication skills. Remember that we would 4 marks. So by being able to discuss current performance measures first, and then discussing the consulting firm's performance measures first, it shows that I'm able to communicate the information properly. I expect to get a mark for doing that, but how I do that? I'll use paragraphs, or I can use the heading. Item number 2, current performance measures. Then I discuss that first. Then down, consulting firm's performance measures. Then I discuss that. I try to get on the mark here. You see that my strategy, what I'm trying to do here, I'm trying to show that my work is well structured, and I expect to get a mark on laying out the report 2 from that. These are free marks, professional marks. You just have to be smart in how you gather them. It's very painful. You get 48, and because you've gotten 2 marks, professional marks, whereas you could just have gotten 4 marks, professional marks in past. These you don't learn it in the exam day, you learn it now. So when you leave this session, you need to go down to try to practice other questions, trying to ensure that am I gathering enough professional marks? Is that right? Right, let's go to the technical part. Evaluate the choice of the current performance measures. So the current performance measures, they are straightly giving the questions. I think there were 2 or 3. There are 3. So now we are addressing this part of the question paper. This is the current performance measure. Okay, before I address the question, I would just like to emphasize this. When you are answering examination question, what is this? Your requirements are at the bottom. It's also possible that these requirements will be given in the question paper. You will see it when you are going to answer other parts of the question. You'll see it when you are going to answer other parts of the question. So as you read, you say if you're a second read, if you're a first reader, when you read the second time, when you read the question number 1A, you're going to find information related to part A only. If it's going to be A item 2, you're going to try to find information related to A item 2. If you are a slow reader, I would recommend you that the first time you read the question paper, please highlight. Now, in examination, they would highlight as a different color. So you can try to highlight elements to do with item number A. You can just write them 1A to highlight it. You try to write, okay, I have a point here. To highlight that I'm going to discuss this point. You can just highlight it like this. I'm going to discuss this point later. You can just highlight like that. I'm going to discuss this point. I'm going to highlight like that. So that when you're now writing, you know that the highlight elements are very essential. I need to use this in my answer. Now let's answer the question. Evaluate the current performance measures. Return on capital employed. This is how I write my answer. As Monza is a listed company, their primary goal is increasing shareholder wealth. This will be reflected by dividends and share price changes. So this is my introduction of the answer. I've explained the overall context of the performance measures for private company. Monza is using return on capital employed. This does not directly measure dividend or share price. This is not an appropriate measure. This is not an effective performance measure. So I've addressed the particular problem number one. I expect to get a mark for that, for just addressing the problems. Please know that when I introduce my part, when I say as a private company, they are expected to use dividend growth and share price. I expect a mark was that is the general concept that will measure financial performance of the company. So I expect a mark there. Then when I link it, return on capital employed does not directly measure changes in the share price and in dividends. I should get another mark for that. Average cost and revenue growth, they also do not address the primary goal of a private company. So in other words, I'm saying in overall terms, the three measures, they are not reliable. They are not good measures for this company. That's what I'm evaluating. However, when you are assessing, you are not just condemning something that it is bad. You also have to acknowledge where it can be useful. The return on capital employed is, generally speaking, a widely used technique. So it does not directly measure, but it's a widely used technique, and therefore it is important for comparison purposes. So I criticize the return on capital employed. However, I'm acknowledging that it is a good performance measure because it can be used. So it is needed, but not as a primary measure. That's what I'm just saying. You must use it, but not as a primary measure. You must have other primary measures. Overall speaking, all these objectives, they address financial measures. They measure man these things if you look at them. The success of a business is generally measured in financial terms. So we can say, combined together, the performance measures try to illustrate or demonstrate to some extent the financial performance of a company. This is fairly acceptable. This is fairly acceptable. It's not well accepted. It's not the best measure, by the way. This is fairly acceptable. So I'm acknowledging that this is a good measure to some extent. That is what we mean when we say evaluate. That is what we mean when we say assess. Because I said all of them are financial measures, you could criticize that one major problem of the current measures is that they don't try to address the drivers of success at Monza. In other words, we are not looking into the future here. These items, they're only focusing on historical performance, but they're not showing us where are we going as a company. The current measures are offered. Currently, Monza uses financial performance measures. These are historical measures and do not reflect drivers of future success. This is a major problem. As a shareholder, if I buy shares today in company, do you think I'm concerned with the man other shareholders got in 1998? Definitely no. I'm concerned with what's going to happen to me tomorrow, next year. So we need performance measures which do reflect future performance. This is just criticizing them in general terms. I expect to get at least 3 marks on my discussion here. If you get 4 marks, a good answer. Okay, out of 12 in current performance measures, they gave me 3 or 4 marks. That's not a bad return. Why so? because you would see that the first part, it only got 3 issues to measure, whereas the second part, it got 4 items to measure. A consulting firm, a consultant, they recommended 4 performance measures. So I expect that I should get more marks on this part when I discuss this 4 performance measures. If you can get 2 marks per performance perspective, for evaluation of financial, 2 marks for customer, 2 marks for innovation and learning, 2 marks for business process, you get all your 12 marks. It is important that when I'm going to answer a question, you have a structure of getting your mark. Because if you don't structure your answer in such a way that you get the most marks possible, you'll be writing, but you fail. Because you are not trying to answer and get marks. I know that this exam, it tests your ability to function at work. But come on, let's agree. The primary purpose of writing an exam for any student is to pass. Yes, you should use the knowledge at work, but the primary purpose is to pass. Because if you could just get this knowledge without having a paper, you could read magazines, you could read books, and you still get the knowledge. But you have to demonstrate that you know this knowledge, you can use this knowledge in the examination. That you need the strategy of attacking questions, of acquiring as many marks as possible. All right, I'm now answering the question. Let's evaluate these questions, focusing on the conducting firm's performance measure. Let's look at the financial performance measure. Currently, Monza is measuring return on capital employed. Return on capital employed, it measures the return to the entire company and not the return to equity. Please know that as a private listed company, the shareholders come first. So at the financial perspective, I would expect Monza to use a metric or a performance measure which addresses the primary goal or primary needs of shareholders, wealth creation. The return on capital employed does not directly measure that. That is from the financial point of view. Instead, I would expect to see a measure of dividend growth here. I would expect to see a historical measure of total shareholder return. I would take it that you know how to calculate total shareholder return from your financial management study. So these are what things I expect to see. Thus, use of resource return on capital employed is not the most appropriate way to measure financial performance. In addition, it might be better to measure at least 2 or 3 elements on the financial perspective. It's good to measure several aspects on the financial performance side. I expect 2 marks for what I've told you already. This is how I write my answer. The use of return on capital employed does not directly measure total shareholder wealth. Instead, a better metric would have been total shareholder return, as it measures both dividends and capital growth. So I'm criticizing that this method does not do what it does in this method. In addition, it might be more appropriate to use ROS with other metrics. I'm showing here that we can't use it alone to measure financial terms. There are so many things to measure in financial terms. So using one metric of financial terms does not appear to be a good idea. I said 2 marks for my answer, which is just structured now. I go to the second part. When we move to the second part, we are going to discuss the customer perspective. Under the customer perspective, we want to measure, this is how I'm writing my answer. Under the customer perspective, we want to measure how customers perceive the company. The reputation or ranking of a company among its customers is very important. Revenue growth does not necessarily mean that customers are happy. Therefore, this is not the best measure in the customer perspective. It's very important to note that in this particular question, they did not ask you to recommend. In other PM questions, we tell them to ask, put a recommendation, or you recommend which other methods to use. Probably, if I'm going to measure this, I would say we could measure this by comparing brand reputation. So we can have reputation leads, brand reputation. We can use customer reviews. When people buy products, these days we put 3 stars, 4 stars on Google, on Facebook, and so forth to rank the company. So this is what we want to see, to have a measure which shows how customers see us. Revenue is not a direct measure. Actually, revenue is a financial measure. The third element, I thank to Max for discussing that part. The third element is the internal business process. This is how I write my answer. Under the internal business process perspective, we want to see how the company is functioning. Therefore, Monza Limited is currently measuring cost. The cost to develop a product is more of a financial measure, and that's inappropriate. A better measure could have been measuring the time taken to develop a drug, measuring approval rate of our drugs. So we're trying to see if we're doing things well, or measuring the time it takes between development and time to sell the drug. You need to ensure that when you are going to address the question, you address the primary issue. The primary issue, it is how we function, not how much money we use. Money is more like a financial issue. So the process here, for example, how many days does it take to start the search of product to the end days? We're measuring how it works here. We can also measure the time it takes to deliver product. If a customer orders a product from the company, how many days does it take from the day of ordering to the day of delivering? We're measuring here how the company functions, not financially, but operationally. The last perspective we have here is the learning and the growth perspective. What are we measuring? Under the learning and growth perspective, we want to see how prepared the company is for the future. That is our primary purpose. So this is our right. From the learning and growth perspective, we want to see how the company is prepared for the future. Currently, Monza measures days of training. Days of training does not necessarily show that we have new skills. Days of training does not necessarily show that we have innovated. This is an inappropriate performance measure. A better performance measure could be number of new products introduced, number of new skills gained by each employee. We are trying to see here that are we ready to have the right skills? We can also measure, for example, the proportion of retained employees. Because if we keep losing our employees, it means that we're not learning. There's people who are learning, they're going with the knowledge. So as a company, are we retaining the knowledge? If we are losing that, then we're not retaining. it's very important to know that when you are criticizing something, you show its problems. You could also try to show if the method is appropriate. You could acknowledge that, for example, training is an important element to promote learning. However, it does not adequately address the issue of skills. So when I use that word, however, that is where I started criticizing it. I acknowledge the positive part, then I criticize. And you could have done it for almost any other part between A, B, C, and D perspectives. All right, you should have 12 marks for our question. Based on what we've discussed there, I don't expect you to get less than 8 marks. It depends on how you write here. It is not only the knowledge which counts here, it depends on how you write. All right, what does item number 2? I'll give you another platform chance again. If you have a question, you can ask. If you want to put a comment, it's okay. I'll give you a minute to ask. If you don't, I'll move on. Say talent, do you have anything else to discuss? Comment to say?
No, thanks.
That's all right. Okay, so we can move on. Item number 3, it says, evaluate the effect of choosing different profit and capital measurements to different measures of return on investment and recommend a suitable approach for model. So when you look at this question, again, it is made of 2 parts. The first part, you want to evaluate the performance measures. The second part, you want to recommend. So in the examination, it's very important that you make this clear so that when you write your answer, you have got 2 parts to the question. You've got 2 parts to the answer. As a minimum, I expect to see 2 paragraphs on answering this question. If I see 1 paragraph, I won't give you a conditional mark because you don't know how to do it. This is how you earn those 4 marks. There is marks because what they're measuring here, they're not just testing your ability, the technical knowledge. They just want to see, can you communicate? And you make it easier for someone to read through your elements. And please note, this is a report. Don't forget that. So because this is a report, we don't expect to see calculations in the report. I mentioned this because this question requires us to do some calculations. The calculations, I said them to be seen in a part called appendix. So you can just call your N working number 1, you just call it appendix 1. And you do it. Please note that if you decide to include the calculations in the report, they won't punish you for that. However, that is not a professional way of presenting a report. That is not a professional way of presenting a report. So let's evaluate the effect of you choosing different profit and capital measures. Again, while we're evaluating here, you start when I was answering almost all my questions, I start by discussing the theory behind. I introduce my concept. And no difference in item number 3. I'll still use the same approach. When you're calculating the return on investment, we would 2 broad measures: return on capital employed and return on equity. The return on capital employed, it measures the percentage return on the total capital used by the company, that is debt and equity. The return on equity, on the other hand, it only measures the return or the profit made by the owners of the company, in brackets shareholders, or in brackets equity. Therefore, it is important that when you choose, you understand the audience. Return on capital employed is appropriate for the entire company, whereas ROE is appropriate for shareholders. Now, I've discussed these things in general terms. I've not applied anything to this particular concept. We want to see the effect, and the effect will get it by calculating. This is what I will write in the examination if it's me writing this question. As shown in appendix 1, the return on equity is high or the return on equity is low. This is primarily because of the high interest, or primarily because of less interest. Put differently, this is also because of the high debt or because of low debt. Obviously, I'm using these things in general terms. In the examination, I would have done calculations. When I say high debt, I can go and write it 4 million. When I say of high, whatever, I illustrate why I must say something is high, why I must say something is low. So let's go and calculate. To calculate, we are given appendices. So we have information. Before I do the calculation, I just want to go back to the question to see that this element which you are supposed to ask is specifically addressed in the question. We are told that there has been debate at the board level on how we should calculate student capital employed. So there are questions raised on this element. The first question was that, what profit should we use? The second requirement was, why should we use that? So when you do evaluation, you need to ensure that you answer these 2 questions. If you don't answer those questions, you are not properly evaluated, because the director of the question, this is where application comes into effect. Because if you don't address those 2 questions, then it means you did not read the question paper. You did not answer what was asked. I'd say for this type of issues, you need close attention to detail. When you're reading the question, you need to see what is out the way. And specifically, whenever you are reading a question paper and you see that someone is with concerns, someone is with questions, please highlight that. When you see that someone is with concerns, when you see that someone is with questions, please highlight that, so that on the answer you write, you need to ensure that you answer this question. You see that there was also a question here, or a concern. She also wondered what the effect would be of using equity rather than capital. So if you address those 3 elements, I would say you have answered the question. It is out in the paper. All right, so what profit figure should we use? When you calculate the return on capital employed, we use operating profit. Operating profit means profit before interest and tax, PBIT. So this is the profit we use. As a result, we also use total capital employed, we use equity and debt. And why do we use that profit and that capital? This is because the operating profit is calculated before showing it shows the overall profit earned by the company using all the resources the company has. In particular, because interest has not yet been deducted, it means that interest has not been treated as an expense. So we need to see the funds put into the company versus the funds generated into the company. We need to see the funds put into the company versus the funds created, or the returns created by those funds. That is the primary reason why we calculate like that. I've answered that first question. The effect part, I'll do it a calculation later on. I got the second part. Alternatively, the company could decide to calculate return on equity, in which case they will use profit after tax. So correctly speaking, they use earnings. And earnings, it is compared versus the equity of the company. And why should this be like this? This is because earnings are the funds available to shareholders. So we want to see, for the funds provided by shareholders, what was their overall net return? I have answered the what and the why. Now let's see on the effect. On the effect of this particular question, you have to calculate, and we do have an appendix. In the appendix, we are given our various elements. We are given operating profits, and we said we can calculate this by looking at the total capital. We are also given the profit after tax or earnings, and we can measure this over equity. So it's time now to make use of my calculator. My return on capital employed, I'll put this in my appendix or as a working, depending on what you prefer. I'll take my operating profit. I divide by my capital employed. You add these two numbers. Obviously, if you can just add this and write the final figure, it's very acceptable. Please note that the answer is multiplied by 100 to make it a percentage. So when I put this on my calculator, 1811 divided by the sum of 1161 and 8739, I get 18.29. So 1161 plus 8739, my operating profit 1811, that's correct. So I get about 19% here. 18.3% or 18.29%. That is my return capital employed. My return on equity, I take my earnings there, or my profit after tax is 1126. And the final figure marked in blue there, over my equity, which is 1161. To make it a percentage, I multiplied by 100 again. 1126 multiplied by 1161. I get 96.9%. 97% actually. 96.98. So I will just call it 99%. All right. So this is the effect. The effect of using return on capital employed is that we get a low return. Why? If the companies we have used a very high capital, if you add these two figures, they get you almost 10 million. 10 billion actually. It's 1,000 million. Either way, it results in a low return because of a high debt capital, high total capital, primarily because of debt. I just say high capital, they acceptable like that. On the other hand, the return on equity is very high because while the profits have been deducted interest and tax, the capital is very low. The shareholder equity is very low. So we see that we move here from 18% to 97%. I've discussed the value of the effect. It seems therefore that if a return on equity is used, the performance of the company is shown to be highly positive at 97% per year, compared to only 18% if we use the return on capital employed. Now, I need to address the question. I go back to my requirements and see if I address all the needs of the question. Evaluate the effect of choosing different profits and capital measures. So I've addressed that and seen the effect. This is high, this is low. In particular, from financial theory, if you did financial management, you will remember that it is good for a company to use high debt or to use high gearing. When you have high debt, it means that the cost of capital or the weighted average cost of capital is going to be low. So we expect the company to have a high limit as a result of using high debt. Now, that is the first part, and I would expect that to get me at least 6 marks. Evaluating the choices, discussing what is the return on equity, discussing what the return on capital employed, then showing the calculations and making my overall conclusions here that it appears therefore that it is better for the company to be using. Okay, this they will recommend a step approach. So the last part is say recommend. Recommending there, I think you only get 3 marks. So probably 8 marks should be coming from the first part. Recommending is only 3 marks there. Recommend a stable approach to Monza Limited. So this is how my recommendation comes. I would recommend Monza to use the return on equity. This is because the primary report or the information, the primary purpose of Monza is to create wealth for the shareholder. So this is the main reasons why I choose it. However, it might be better to use both methods. And that is the best approach they should use with them. It might be better to use both approach. So you could say, I recommend them to use the equity, or you could say, I recommend them to provide both metrics. They should provide both metrics and explain what does the 2 figures mean. So don't just report it on capital employed. Don't just report it on equity, but rather give them both metrics and explain what does each return mean, so that a person who is less financial knowledge, they should be able to understand what it really means for the company. And with that, I would say I've addressed the question on item number 3. All right, for the purpose of this session, I would say I've covered quite a lot on performance measurements, and I would say this is enough for our lecture. However, before I wrap up our lecture, the reason why I'm leaving item number 4 in item number 5 is that this is a different part of the syllabus. It's a different part of the syllabus, actually different 2 parts of the syllabus. So I'm not going to answer them now. If you are practicing at this point in time, I would accept that, I would expect that you have read, covered the entire syllabus. Therefore, you should be able to answer item number 4 and item number 5 as well. Okay, just to illustrate something else before I leave. When you open the different examination question papers, this is a December 2016 paper I'm opening now. So the first paper we saw was the June 2016, and this is the December 2016 paper. When you look at the requirements, it wanted to look at the performance report. That is it appropriate or is it not? When you look at the second requirement, it says evaluate 2 performance measures given there. This is very similar to what we saw earlier on, what the consulting firm was doing. And you have to evaluate the new performance measures. Actually, the first performance measure there, it was the same as the one we measured, the current performance measures. And this one, it was introduction, this was the change. Okay, so in both cases, they were actually measuring new measures, the same what we did with the consulting firm. So they're measuring as we did with the consulting firm, the new measures. Then I sent the proposal to change the performance measures. And here you want to see, is this right or wrong? So you are saying if you're going to introduce new measures, if you're going to remove old measures, is this good or is this bad? Again, this is an extension of this question based on what we saw earlier on. So the question papers, they're exactly the same. You'll see that. In this next question, they ask you calculate the return on capital employed. This technically the same question is one we just answered now. What does this mean? Question practice is very important. And when you do your question practice, you need to always ensure that you read the examiner's report. You need to read the examiner's report. Okay, that's what the 2016 paper. Let's just look at the current examination paper. I'll open the March 2021 exam. This is section A question paper in the March, December, let's confirm the period, yes, March, June 2021. So we see that the question, the first part, it deals with the manipulation in the board report. This has something to do with ethics. It's not exactly what we discussed today. We saw the impact of the report. This is dealing about performance measurement. Does the performance measurement, the performance report, do what it's supposed to do? We have a reference to a consultant here, but this time around it's covering something different. And the last element, it is performance measures in a particular division. This is a very specialized question. It's different to performance measures in general. You have to contextualize it to the production department. But you can say this topic is asked almost in every exam. Actually, it is asked every exam. What you need here is to just have a thorough understanding and a good approach to answering questions. Looking forward to meet you in my next session. Thank you for attending and good luck in your studies.
Thank you very much, Leonard. Thank you. It's really